in the southern tier of New York, where there are more cows than there are people. The nearest ALS support group is an hour and a half away, and the nearest ALS certified clinic is 3 hours away. Our upstate New York chapter must cover 59 counties with 4 girls working staff. Many learn ALS is a blessing in disguise, as it has shown them that life is still worth living. Surrendering is not an option. Our bodies may become the consistency of an overripe banana, but we never give up on our hopes and will to live as we learn to appreciate what we have often overlooked due to meeting the expectations of today's society. It slows the body down to relook, rethink, adjust to the new road of life that otherwise might not have been traveled. I came to DC for the first time last year. I was inspired to return home and to make a difference and make a change. For those reasons, I have become the local voice of ALS, to bring ALS out of the shadows, to teach the public that ALS has 2 languages, sporadic and familiar, to tell that ALS claims everyone in the family, not just the patient. ALS is a disease that is not a one-size-fits-all. I ask you all, what would you do while you still could? Part of my goals has been to be able to fight to make a change, and one of them that we've been working on is the issue with Social Security disability that really affects a lot of FALS families. There's a full 5-month calendar wait for ALS patients. Often the waiting time cripples a family already facing the challenges of a terminal illness with no treatment and no cure. The younger faces of ALS need to change so that a patient does not have to die the same week that their SSD check arrives, like my little sister did. Help us fight for 5 months to change it to a 1-month status. With many FALS families, once the progression reaches a full speed, we are gone usually in 4 to 12 months, unless we are given a chance for feeding tube or trach, which to date, none of my family has opted for that option. Throughout the many years of dealing with familiar ALS, we have faced condescending remarks from doctors not understanding the impact of FALS and truly what it means to a family. I'm sure many of the families here today can agree with me that to get a diagnosis of ALS is sometimes like jumping through a ring of fire. Doctors often ask and say that we are a waste of their time, especially if you are in a rural area. Some don't believe that FALS can ripple through a family. My little sister had a neurologist tell her there's no way that our family had been diagnosed correctly. While others face unnecessary surgeries only to tell the patient later that they are indeed a FALS patient. Learn to speak out and demand a second opinion for yourself. Research and record your family history. Ask the questions now while you still can. Often in the cases, you have no family to return to ask these questions. Keep a journal of your own health. Understand and know your changes, because often ALS starts years in advance before the rapid progression takes hold. Be ready to fight back when you come from a FALS family, as many are labeled as sometimes a nutcase because we are misunderstood. Many pre-symptomatic FALS patients are told they are depressed, stressed, experiencing psychological problems from losing family members to ALS. When looking back on our history since I was born, my mom has been 100% accurate in diagnosing each one of us. I have lost 7 since I was born. Our fears are great for a reason. ALS is like a tornado. Why it strikes 2 sisters and why it leaves 2 other sisters negative, we will never know that answer. Always remember, for something this disease has taken, something with a greater value is often given. For this reason, I will share with you my family story. My message for the story is about never closing the door and a change. I was 13 years old when ALS became a part of my life. It was 1977, and I was staying with my grandparents. I overheard them talking about Grandma's sister Ginny having the creepy crawly disease. Back then, ALS was often called the consumption of the nerves. Grandpa asked if this was the same disease that Ginny's great-grandmother had died from years ago, and it had been a secret in the family. Grandma said Ginny was losing her ability to swallow, and her skin was crawling as if there was bugs underneath it. The bugs were what we now know as fasciculations, or muscle twitches, that are characteristics of ALS. I remember thinking, wow, Aunt Ginny has bugs under her body, and I hope I never get that. We were not supposed to listen to the adult conversations, so I never asked about the bugs, and Ginny passed away 3 months later, and the door was closed on ALS. Little did we know that the door would reopen again in 1979. This time it was my Aunt Bonnie. Grandma's daughter was sick. She was a beautiful 39-year-old divorced single mother. At the time, her 4 children ranged in ages 11 through 17. We didn't know how to properly care for her, but my mom and my grandma did the best that they could. My Aunt Bonnie's primary caregiver became her 13-year-old son. My dad nailed a wooden chair to a car creeper with rollers on it, and this contraption became her wheelchair. The scars Bonnie's children endured from caring for their dying mother at such a young age have never healed today. Bonnie passed away within 5 months of diagnosis, but looking back, she had had the disease for several years. The door was closing on ALS again, but not before I asked a few questions. Grandma said there was this muscle disease that seemed to run in her family that causes the muscles to crawl, and there's nothing that the doctors could do. She showed me the pages of 2 pages of information the doctor had given her, and that was all we knew about this thing called ALS. Back then there wasn't any help like ALSA or chapters to turn to when a patient and their families were diagnosed. ALSA was not formed until 1985. Hope and a change was coming. In December 1989, my dad, Grandma's son, took a terrible fall on icy front steps of his house. He believed this to be his onset of his ALS symptoms. He lost the ability to hunt and to fish for him, which was a way of life. In 1991, I lost my dad to ALS. He lived just 11 months from diagnosis. My mom developed creative methods to make it easier to care for my dad. After all, this was her 3rd time facing ALS as a caregiver. But we still didn't know how to get help for ALS families. One of the things that my mom did is she kept a journal and kept notes. It seems our family does not have muscle wasting into the last final weeks before their death, because on Father's Day that year, my father looked like he was normal. 6 weeks later, he was nothing but skeleton. Then in 1996, Grandma died of bulbar ALS, where she lost her speaking and swallowing abilities before limb function, and also suffered from dementia, sometimes associated with the disease. In her last few months, she came to my home. I cared for her with the help of my husband, my mom, and my little children. I learned so much from my grandma throughout my life. She was a very special lady. She always felt this was her fault. Upon researching our genealogy, I traced the disease with Michelle's help through 13 generations of grandmas back to the 1600s, discovering the more than 20 additional family members who suffered from now what we know is ALS. Once again, Grandma's illness, we had questions but no answers. And living in a rural area, the doctors never offered also up for help. We cared for Grandma on our own, for my mom the 4th time, but the door was again closed. Never in our wildest dreams did we think that ALS would keep reappearing in our lives. I remember thinking that not much has changed since 1997 to 1996, and wondering how much more one family should suffer. The hardest part is to always tell the story about my little sister Rhonda. She was married, 38, with children ages 8 and 11 when ALS took her life. My mom was a pro now, and she became Rhonda's 24/7 caregiver for 7 months. Rhonda had a vibrant personality and was always the life of the party. After 2 misdiagnoses, Rhonda thought she would be all right. After all, she had gone and seen a certified ALS clinic neurologist. She thought they had to be right, that her symptoms weren't ALS. But on a third opinion, and with the help of Dr. Stanley Appel, she was told that ALS was true, and she was given by Dr. Appel 6 months to live. She lost her fight 5 short months later in January of 2007. She suffered deeply and without the proper help or equipment. During her last 4 months, she was never able to leave the house, as they didn't have a wheelchair van or a way to get Rhonda outside over the steps. Rhonda didn't leave us without making a change. She wanted DNA testing done to see if I carried the SOD1 gene. This gave us the marker for researchers to test our family members and to open the door for hope. My 2 older sisters are negative, and I have a first cousin who is negative. Nobody else in my family will be tested. I began this fight in 2009. It took me 3 months to tell my mom she'd lose another child to ALS. After I have 2 wonderful co-workers who helped me fling the door wide open and search for more information. Little did we know that 3 women would embark upon a journey of friendship, love, and lots of encouragement from our ALS support group. We must travel 90 minutes one way to attend a monthly chapter meeting in Rochester, New York. Living in the southern tier of the state, we don't have the resources in the rural areas. We became involved and wanted to make a change. I've brought awareness into the community. I do a lot of public speaking about ALS. Our team raised almost $12,000 for our Walk to Defeat walk in September. I will not settle to keep the door closed and be quiet about this disease. It is hard, but I am the voice for my children, nieces, nephews, cousins, who have a 50% chance of inheriting ALS. For them and for everyone, we need to seek change, as the door we walk through may lead us to a cure. The door is open wider than it has ever been to talk about this beast called ALS. We have clinical trials, healthcare providers, respite care, and the National Advocacy Days here. I encourage everyone to join us upon the wings of a swallow. May we fly into the changes that are needed to stop the ALS.